Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is going to feel a little bit like a Quentin Tarantino movie because we're going to skip way ahead in your story and things going on. There's been something I've been wanting to ask you about for
Sure.
a long time. Something that kind of came up last year. I believe when I reached out last year, I believe you were in a space where you weren't able to kind of talk about what was going on at that time. Was that the case?
Yeah, it was just a challenging time when my study got shut down right away immediately, and I really just wasn't prepared to be talking about that. And now we can talk about it a little bit more. So yeah, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I was not aware of the study itself. I'm sure most people were not aware of the study itself. We were only aware that a study had been all of a sudden just completely canceled. Of course, our amazing mutual friend, Dr. Chris Palmer, put out a petition to try to petition this study to get put on again, which I checked last night has over 20,000 signatures at the time of this recording. And we just all heard that there was this amazing study. It was going to be done examining diet, in particular, like low carbohydrate or ketogenic diets in the world of schizophrenia. And all of a sudden it goes dark. And we were all just like, well, what just happened? Why? What's the motive? Like, that's the biggest thing I get from people when they hear about it is like, why was this taken down? Is there any explanation given? So again, this is going to be like a Quentin Tarantino movie. We're going to skip ahead in your story
Yeah.
before we go back and tell your own personal story. But I've been dying to ask you what happened. What was the study? How was the study conjured up? How was it going to be presented? And then what happened?
Oh gosh, this last spring was a whirlwind. And so it had been an exciting year leading up to that. We had, been working on our newest clinical trial looking at a ketogenic diet for people who had schizophrenia. It was going to be done in an inpatient setting, which would be the first thing in the United States in a setting where we could control the food, the exercise, all, the environmental factors. And this would have been one of the most robust studies we would have had. We were excited. We had funding to do this study. We were in a research program working with a state hospital facility where I've been practicing, like you said, well over 25 years. We have performed over 40 clinical trials. We're a very stringent research program. And we unfortunately, our Secretary of Health in the Department of Health was unfamiliar largely with research being done and people who had severe mental illness, really not understanding the history of that, not understanding all the details around it, and without any issues with our study, decided to shut down all of our research. Now, fortunately, because we had NIH studies, et cetera, happening, there was pressure from NIH. There was a lot of pressure from the community. As you know, 21,000 people signed this petition that Chris Palmer put out. But not only that, but many advocacy groups wrote letters, large advocacy groups. For example, the Schizophrenia and Psychosis Action Alliance jumped in. There was the Maryland Psychiatric Society wrote letters. Many people who I didn't even know, sort of on my behalf, reached out. They did overturn the decision to allow federally funded studies to occur, but drew the line on non-federally funded studies. And so that left us in a little bit still of a bind where we have been trying to educate and trying to have people understand like how stringent the studies are, whether they're federally funded or they're funded by private foundations. And in fact, like we have very little funded by NIH anymore in the clinical trial realm, not just in schizophrenia, but in all aspects of psychiatric treatment. So private foundations are really critical to help fund the research initiative in our country. So that's where we're at. We're still not overturned. And I can a little bit more about that. We have a new Secretary of Health that stepped in February of this year. And so I've had some initial conversations, and around that, we have put in an ask to the new administration to overturn that. And so I'm very hopeful that we'll start negotiations to get that overturned to be able to start the study. We've learned a lot in a year. We've learned even, I always feel like a door closes and another one opens. So I'm hopeful that this will be a new stepping stone for us to even do some additional outcomes in the study that we wouldn't even done the first time. So there's where we're at. We're clear fast forward. I'm not there yet. I'm not crossed the finish line to get restarted again, but we are well prepared to move forward again once we
Wow.
are able. Yeah, yeah.
I love the positivity and the optimism. That must have been so frustrating when that happened. It sounds like a really promising trial. And these are going to be like really honest questions. I don't know much
Sure.
about this, but what does it matter where the funding comes from, whether it comes from NIH, the government, or from public fund? Like what difference does the money itself make?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things here, right? There's perception and then there's the reality. The reality is that it makes no difference either way. We still have to have all of our studies in all of us in the country we're seen by our institutional review boards. These are boards that are outside independent people that manage. We have for our studies data safety monitoring boards, so it's a whole nother study type board that manages. We have hospital research committees we have three governing bodies. That's just the three that alone, but we have, we monitor ourselves, et cetera. And sometimes we have, which the federal government, OHAR, Office of Health and Research Protections, also looks up. So we have many people overseeing our research, and that really doesn't depend on how that's funded. So we have to do the same rigorous processes no matter how we do studies. Now, the perception is to the community, potentially in this case, is that federally funded studies might have more oversight than a private foundation, or there might be more influence. Now, many private foundations have no influence themselves on the science. So they're not influencing the outcome, or it's not a pharmaceutical company saying, if you do this and we'll do this, or, it's still very independent science. We write the protocols, we write the grants. So the perception, I think, was there that there is potentially differences in the scrutiny and the oversight, when in fact, there's in many times just as much oversight in both, whether it's federally funded or not. So that's how I would describe it, giving the benefit of the doubt to why someone might wonder, what the
Yeah,
difference
and
is.
by and large, like these boards and this oversight, I mean, you might have complaints about certain rules or certain things you can and can't do, but by and large, this makes sure that we do studies that are ethical. A bunch of studies that we've done in the past could never pass some of those boards today. It's lucky that, Dr. George Cahill, for example, did the fasting studies where they fasted people and then dosed them with insulin after like 40 days. You could never get away with doing that today, but we do have that data. It's nice. But by and large, these standards are really good to make sure we're not doing things that are unethical or really sketchy.
No, these are really good safeguards in place. And in fact, I'm a treatment researcher. So everything that we do, I want to show benefit to people we're treating today. So we're not doing experimental studies where there's outcomes where we're not sure what's going to happen. In fact, in the studies that we have, and even in the keto diet, for example, I wrote it such that every person would get benefit for some aspect of the study. So the study was written so that it was it was a single blind study. So the patients themselves knew what they were taking. The people rating them on their psychiatric symptoms didn't know what they were taking. So everyone sort of knew what they were taking. So it was safe. We knew what they were getting. And then it was 5 weeks of treatment, but either the keto diet or the regular diet. But after the 5 weeks, for 8 weeks, people could have opted to go on a keto diet free of charge, or with good oversight, with good help and helping them get started, with good understanding, like how do you actually do this, so that if they were, when they're discharged, they could go out in the community and do it. So everybody had an opportunity, and it's really difficult, sometimes to implement that on your own. Here's the chance in the hospital setting for people to help them do it, where everybody would get some type of benefit in the study.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad you reiterated that point, and I want to reiterate that again. When you're saying you've got people impatient and you're controlling the food, somebody might think, well, what's the big deal? Like, isn't that how all food studies are done? Can you contrast that with what like a normal, food study might collect their data? Why that's so different?
You mean being in inpatient setting? So yeah, in the inpatient setting, we have a dietitian here on staff, and the dietitian is trained in how to do ketogenic diet, so that our dietary menus are all designed with people in mind for being here in the hospital, for what they might like. We ask them at the beginning if they have preferences. If they don't have preferences, we are catering to make it as easy as possible. So this is not just like a stringent where this is absolutely what you're going to do and you don't have any choice. There's lots of choice in this matter. We're just helping them get into ketosis in a very structured way. And so it's a nice setup for people to be able to participate, and it gave them something additional to try. In addition to that, we didn't stop any medications. There was no changes in medications. This was an adjunct. So it allowed people to stay on the treatment that they're getting, but also be able to try a dietary intervention as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just you think about that, and again, I don't know that most people really consider this, but when you see headlines that come out that say red meat, is associated with cancer or whatever it is, they're basing their assumptions based on, say, a food frequency questionnaire. How many times in the last year have you had apple in parentheses one. Have you had it once a month, twice a month, once a week, twice? Like they're terrible. You can't really discern any data, yet they draw these conclusions from those studies. Like actually fee, or another example would be like, well, we gave these people education about the ketogenic diet. We gave this other group of people education about a standard American diet, and they just went off and ate themselves. Well, you don't know what they're actually doing in their day-to-day life. They may be
Oh,
following your advice,
it's
might be different yesterday to today. Today they may be keto. Tomorrow it might be tacos and pizza. Like you have no idea. So to
right.
have that level of control is it's such a huge step.
It's a huge step, Casey, because as you said, you send people home, and as you know, you and I both, and anybody listening out there, how hard it is to actually, to adhere completely to something. And so here we have the opportunity to help people, like, oh, I'm thinking I don't want to be in the diet. Okay, well, you don't have to be in the study, but we have a snack for you. We have a snack for you. You don't have to go make a snack. We have everything set up for you to make it as stringent as possible. And so we don't miss anything. We make sure that everybody eats everything on their plate. And if they don't eat everything on their plate, for a keto diet, we have to, change up the next day just to make sure the ratios are the same, so that we make sure that there's no room for extra confounds into this study. That it's really anything that we're looking at is because of the dietary changes, and that's pretty powerful for science. Because if we run a large clinical trial in the outpatient setting and people mess that up and we don't have an effect, and we say, well, we spent $3 million of taxpayers' money and we just don't know if we did a good job. That's not fair to anyone. So we're being the most efficient we can be, having the most stringent study in an inpatient setting that you can get out there. And the world was awaiting our results because there were no inpatient studies. So, I hope that we can deliver on that. And that's my hope, that we can do
Oh
that.
my goodness. Yeah, I hope so too. And on that note, like since I become a nutrition coach, many years ago, I used to write a lot of meal plans. I hardly ever do now, because I can tell you for the hundreds of meal plans I've carefully spent tons of time on and written, I can tell you the compliance percentage of somebody on a meal plan is exactly 0%. Like nobody, nobody does.
Right.
Yeah.
But here
Well,
we had it. Here we have a well done study. So
yeah.
yeah.
Sounds amazing. And then with the cancellation, again, what was a reason provided? Was a new criteria laid out? You missed this part. We need to clean this up. Anything along those lines given, as far as like, here's why. Nothing.
Zero. There were zero
Crickets.
human subjects protections, concerns, or any concerns with how we conduct business. Absolutely zero. And I can say that with 100% accuracy. We were actually given that note that said there are no concerns about how the conduct of the study is. We just are thinking about a new rule about the federally funded versus non-federally funded studies. And I just think that, like I said, that perception's there. If we do education and try to get over that, I think that having federally funded and non-federally funded studies as an opportunity here in Maryland will be hopefully important for everyone to move forward on that in the future. But zero human subjects concerned with our study at all.
Okay. Well,
I
you
know
don't
it's a
have to.
lot. It's mind blowing, but
It really is.
it's a year later, and I'm trying to find the path forward, because the science is so important, and it's really important to answer this question. So I'm going to figure it out, and we're going to get it done.
You're amazing. You're the best. You don't have to comment on this. I would understand 100% if you don't. I'll just leave this here. Like what I'm thinking. What the people in this community are thinking. When we see that this work is about to be done, it gets canceled out of nowhere. Those of us who have been in the metabolic psychiatry realm for a while understand, like when you're trying diet up against medication for some of these things, like it's not perfect, but it's not even close. Like it's such a vast delta for the results that you can get on this stuff, and to us it looks pretty nefarious. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't have good optics as far as what we can see. So again, I understand if you don't want to comment on that, but that must be a sentiment that is
Yeah, and I think
communicated to you.
I agree that it did not have good optics, and I think that's why it went so viral. I think within there was a lot of press, there were a lot of people contacting me to communicate. Everyone's trying to figure out. There's a lot of speculation on what this might mean, and like you said, even if you read, we do have the results from that online survey, the 21,000 people that signed the change.org. We were able to get those, even though I didn't start it. We were able to get that information back to us, and we could actually read all 1,100 comments that were in there. And you're right, a lot of people said, I have had benefit on a keto diet. My patients have, my sister has, my brother have, I have. It's amazing. 37 countries represented across the globe. People said amazing things, but there were lots of comments that that said it's very interesting that, why is a dietary study being stopped and not a pharmaceutical study when in fact it could be very safe. And so there were hundreds and hundreds, if you look at the data, of people that actually, looked at the optics that way. I can't speculate on why. I mean, I can speculate, but I really have no information to sort of share on that about why the pharmaceutical study, the medication study could proceed when the other one couldn't, other than it was federally funded versus non-federally funded. But you're right, the optics are there. We need to be really, like, as a field, we need to make sure that we are giving opportunities to our patients that are for medications and for alternative treatments that might be effective both. And I started off as I'm a pharmacist. My background is in pharmacy. Medications and pharmacology is my wheelhouse. That's where I started. And for me to be in this space, looking at dietary interventions, it's because the science took us there and the treatment outcomes take us there. I'm more concerned about what to do about our patients and how to give best treatment and best care. This study is one of those things that I'm just very excited to keep moving forward.
Well, amazing. I can't wait for it to come out. I'm sure the tides will turn. And like you mentioned earlier in the conversation, a door closes, another one opens. A few months ago, I've mentioned this before on the show, Nicole Laurent told me how you can put into Google Scholar a keyword, so ketogenic, and all the studies that have to do with ketogenic come to my email. And it is like drinking from a fire hose. It's insane. It's like every other day, I've got another email. Like, I don't have time to comb through all these. And to think, like, you're doing amazing work. That study could have come out something like that. Like, maybe hardly anybody knew about it. And now, at least with the controversy, everybody's got eyeballs on it, and we're going to be very fascinated with the results. And so that may be the big opportunity here, is by closing this down. Not only will people watch this space a lot more closely and watch this study, but maybe could get interested even more in this stuff. So I think overall it would be positive. I'm really hoping that you are able to conduct it.
Absolutely. We're a group in Maryland that's well known for doing clinical trials and doing them really, really well. So I have a strong team here. We have a strong team of people. We have a strong research support community and advocacy community in Maryland. I just think that everything is right for being able to move forward. And so we will.